And I'll try to mute people as they come in.
Yeah.
Go ahead, honey.
I didn't get that person yet.
That's Harry. You can't mute Harry.
Oh.
Harry's grandmother's awesome though.
Oh, I think I did mute. Okay. There, I've asked to unmute Harry. Hello, everyone that is joining us. We let you in a little early. That's okay. Middle. It's great to have so many people with us tonight.
Susan Wan's here. I can see with the captions that I need to speak more clearly.
Right.
It's like the elocution lessons.
Yeah.
Hi, Juan. Welcome.
Hi. Yeah, my name's Scott Bradley, and I'm from Nob Hill United Church in Toronto. I see that it's got my employee number on there.
We can rename you as
Not for the church, but for my work.
I was going to say, you must be a big church with all those employees.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sandy McKenzie. I'm from Trinity United in Newmarket, and I'm a member of Climate Action Newmarket Aurora and a friend of Fran Bezos.
Oh, wow. Welcome. We're going to let Harry start right at 7. So I'm just warning everybody, he'll start taking over. This is Harry Bezos.
Just want to make sure, Harry, I might have hit mute on your iPad. You want to just check and make sure you're unmuted?
Can
Oh,
you
no,
hear me?
you're there. Okay, you're good.
Okay, so I don't know how I get into the whole meeting.
Well,
I don't
you're
see
here with
Fran.
us.
You're
You
Fran.
can see me there? Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to
Great.
mute you though.
okay.
That's
Do you want me
Okay,
to mute me?
Yeah,
perfect.
sure.
That way I don't have to try to figure this all out. Get rid of that.
Harry's going to start.
Just one of the many issues of the climate crisis is how it is damaging our ecosystems, not only here in Canada, but all across the world. Just one example is the damage to the coral reefs across the world, and most notably, the Great Barrier Reef. You may be concerned about the climate crisis, but it is much worse than you think. Much worse. I am Harry Bezos, a participant of the RHUC and a student in York Region, and I will be the student host for this meeting. Welcome attendees and guests. Before we get this meeting started, I would like to thank everyone for caring enough to find out how to reduce emissions in church buildings across the region. Here is Susan Eagle, the chair of the Social and Ecological Justice Commission.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our event tonight. I was asked to say a little bit about the Social Justice Commission. It's composed of about 10 people drawn from our Shining Waters region. And our focus as a Social Justice Commission is to work on both encouraging, educating, animating social justice work in our region, which is a bit of a tall order, but we've got some very energetic people who serve on the commission. I want to mention Dawn Ford is on, Esther Collier. I think Juan Her is going to be joining us.
He's here.
I know that Irene Green is on. Jeffrey Dale is our staff support person. And I'm not sure if there's any other members of the commission on, but perhaps they can identify themselves later. I was asked to open with a prayer, and I'm going to do that now. And I want to start with just pulling some words from our Song of Faith for the United Church, and just one little section of that reads, finding ourselves in a world of beauty and mystery, of living things diverse and interdependent, of complex patterns of growth and evolution, of subatomic particles and cosmic swirls. We sing of God, the creator, the maker and source of all that is. And let us continue in prayer. Holy One, we gather in fellowship, aware of both the beauty and fragility of our environment. We are aware of the challenge of this time, painfully aware of ways in which we have neglected the call to care for creation. May your call to wholeness and healing inspire and challenge us as we live into this time. Amen. And finally, I just want to say a word of thanks to those who are leading our event tonight, particularly Esther, for the work that she has done in preparing this. Now back to you.
I love being outdoors in the fresh air and the wonderful smells. I just love it. However, without climate justice and the reduction of emissions, the fresh air and wonderful smells are things that the next generation and even this one might forget. A goal of mine is to not only reduce emissions that I make, but to reduce the emissions of others by spreading awareness of the climate crisis. Esther Collier will now give a land acknowledgement and explain the goals of this evening.
Hi, everyone. I'm Esther Collier, and I'm the chair of the Ecological Justice Subcommittee on the Social and Ecological Justice Commission. And I just wanted to take a minute for us to think about the land, the soil, and the water. The water that we live, and the land, soil, and water that we live on, and the air that we live in. And then to think about those who walked here before us. And for me, they are the Chippewas of Georgina Island and other Anishinaabeg nations, the Huron-Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nation. I like to take time to actually find out a little more about these nations every time I do a presentation, and I'll be sharing a little bit about the Chippewas this evening. And then think about the processes that occurred to remove these people from the land that we're on. And for me, two of the major legal actions that were taken were the Toronto Purchase and the Williams Treaties. These were treaties, but they weren't held in very just ways. And but of course, there also were students who were taken away to go to residential schools, and the Indian Act played a role, of course, in this territory as well. And that leads us to think about what we need to do for reconciliation to happen. And part of that is being informed, and that's why I'm taking time to do a little research on the nations that have been here. And I just was amazed in reading more about the Chippewas of Georgina Island, because they've entered into an environmental management agreement to enact environmental protection legislation on their reserve. And they have, as part of this process, they have developed a set of bylaws to ensure that the issues on their land are addressed, which is what we all need to be doing, I think. And I'm just awestruck at how much they've done, because in 2008, they did an environmental scan. So they did research, they measured, and they found out and developed programs and services to address the issues they found. And that included creating a community advisory committee. I think that's kind of like what we could be. And that was asked to help assess the continuing climate changes in the future and recommend actions to prevent them. I just think this is awesome. Tonight, we're going to be listening for about 15 to 20 minutes to Stephen Collette, who's the Building and Audit Manager for Faith in the Common Good. But a large proportion of this meeting is for group networking. I'm introducing Okay, we'll let that get settled. Good. So we'll be doing some group networking, and I will be introducing Stephen Dixon as well. Actually, he'll introduce himself, who is also one of our experts here. If you have expertise, please share that in that networking time. It's hard as a leader to leave this blank time in our schedule, but it's really, really important to me that we hear each other's voices. At the end of the meeting, I'll try to consolidate what I heard in that discussion and then hope that you will fix any mistakes that I make. And we will tell you about what the next situation is. Just as we continue with this introduction and opening though, I want to draw attention to the current climate situation. And even though it's only been a few months since I last presented, these are 4 new situations that are happening around the world and are linked to the climate crisis. Cyclone Freddy broke records in several ways, and that's in Malawi, Madagascar, and Mozambique, and there were lives and homes lost due to this cyclone. The drought in the Horn of Africa is continuing. It is now in the 5th year, and they think that it is likely to continue this year. That is having devastating effects, and we don't hear about the situation there very often. There are millions of people in hunger and children being affected probably permanently. We know about the atmospheric rivers on the North American West Coast, and that was not supposed to happen. That's because I clicked on a link. I'll see if I can get this back to full screen in a minute. Sorry, enter full screen. I'm trying not to click on a link with my mouse, and just because there are some photos that I have here. The atmospheric rivers in the North American West Coast, record-breaking rainfall and snowfall, that's going to melt, and that's snow, and there will be probably more loss of life and homes. And Cyclone Gabrielle in New Zealand, which was also making record news and included loss of life and homes. Because of this situation, what I love is that our United Church Canada responds to the evidence, and the 44th General Council adopted climate objectives last year in 2022. And these objectives were such that they recognized the critical nature of this. They set a very strong, powerful goal, and that is to reduce emissions in the United Church itself. So they left it very vague and open. We'll talk about that in a minute. And the goal was for an 80% decrease in emissions by 2030. And I just want to draw your attention to the fact that they also have a commitment to measure, report, and adjust based on learnings. Because we in the Commission are also trying to figure out how we can measure and maybe be working with Faith in the Common Good, for example, to get accurate data from churches. So we may be asking you to contribute some of your data to help us have a better understanding of what can be done. The IPCC is, of course, where we go for a lot of our evidence. This is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It has, without doubt, saying that this is a threat to human well-being and that we have a limited time, and 2030 is the date that I hear as being when they expect this window to be closed. And so that really leaves us a very few years to do the actions that need to be done. But they always tell us hope as well by saying that there are ways, and when they talk about that, they talk about communities and how the communities can pursue this climate resilient development. With communities, we find efficient ways to share energy, as well as finding expertise and human resources that we can access. And that's why we're holding these networking meetings.
What the IPCC is talking about could be called crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing is the practice of turning a body of people to obtain needed knowledge, goods, or services. Alone, we don't know how to retrofit churches on a limited budget, but crowdsourcing keeps us from making mistakes that others have already solved and lets us find solutions others have invented. This may be the only way to get a livable future for me.
So we hope you leave tonight better equipped to meet the General Council 44's goal, with many of the current issues you have resolved, but also leaving you with connections to other people who can help resolve future problems. We'll be sharing a way that we hope will help us continue to connect after the meeting.
While most of this meeting is for crowdsourcing, with you being the crowd, we also want to get some information from an expert first. If you have any questions during his presentation, please use the chat to share your questions. They will be answered during the networking time. After the presentation, you can use the chat or raise your hand. It would be really helpful if you put your full name and the faith community that you are a part of, as well as your contact information in the chat. If you don't feel safe to do so publicly, you can send a private message to Susan or Jeffrey. This is a safe place to be, so let's ensure that our comments are kind and respectful. Tonight, we have invited Stephen Collett. Stephen Collett co-created the Green Audit after to improve the connections between faith, buildings, and the existing passion of people who want to do the right thing within their faith community. The Green Audit has been delivered across Canada to rave reviews. Stephen is also managing the United Church of Canada's Faithful Footprint Decarbonization Grant. Stephen is a certified building biology environmental consultant, a leadership in energy and environmental design accredited professional, and a building science specialist, as well as an accredited heritage professional specializing in faith community buildings. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you, everyone. Nice to see everybody here. There are a few familiar faces in this giant crowd of people. A shout out to the Collicuts. Nice to see you, my friends. All right, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to give you a little song and dance tour through some ways to save some energy on your building. So as Harry introduced, a lot of sort of blah, blah, blah for me. Basically, I'm a building nerd. That's what I do. That's what I am. And I love what I do. I'm grateful to be doing it. We're going to talk about how to save you money and think about strategies and ways to look at your building in a different light when we're talking about your church. All right. The first thing we want to talk about is a pyramid of conservation. When I get people coming to me, they're like, I want to put solar panels on my roof, which is awesome because it's a great thing to do. However, it shouldn't be the first thing. We want to walk and crawl and walk before we start flying off the roof. So what we really want to think about is this pyramid of energy efficiency is a really great way to look at things. We want to start with that foundational piece. And that foundational piece is understanding your bills, like actually tracking your energy, looking at how your energy is consumed. And that can be through, pardon me, just looking at them and keep them in a spreadsheet or putting them into some software. But when we move up this, we want to start thinking about LED lights. Do we have LED lights through the whole building? Do we have programmable thermostats? Do we have setbacks? Do we have plug load understanding? Ceiling fans in our big old drafty churches. And then we move into things like air sealing. And so air sealing is your attic hatch on your chimney. I mean, your steeple, right? Your steeple is a great big giant chimney bolted to the front of your building, sucking heating dollars out by the gobs. Okay, and so air sealing our attic hatches can save us tremendous money. We're using new ceiling fans, drive that thermal energy down to where we actually want it instead up 40 feet in the air. As we move up this, it gets more and more expensive, right? So now we're into like Energy Star appliances. If you are rocking an avocado green or harvest gold fridge in that kitchen, it is financially killing you. All right. Yes, that fridge will not die and it'll outlive all of us, but it's costing you a fortune. So we want to think about Energy Star appliances, dishwashers, all of that sort of stuff. Then we move into sort of more expensive stuff, really looking at building envelope, the fabric, the walls and the roof and everything. We want to think about insulation. Do you have any? And yes, I've talked to some East Coast, oh yeah, we got about 1/2 inch of seaweed in the walls, or I've got nothing in the walls, like really common coast to coast. So we want to be thinking about what our buildings have in them and how we can help. And then water heating and thinking about better water heating systems. Then we're getting near the top, and now we're into the mechanicals, we're into the big costs, right? And so again, if you have an old boiler or an old furnace from the 80s, that's 40 years old. Now, I'm not sure about you guys, but when we look at a furnace or something like that, maybe 1980s, out of the box, sparkly new, it could have been maybe 82% efficient, somewhere in that range. Now, 40 years on, I am not as efficient as I used to be. And I don't suspect anyone else here is either. Neither's your furnace. Okay, so it means we're really losing a lot of heating dollars when we're looking at really old appliances. Okay. And yes, I've had one congregation come to me and their boiler was 84 years old. I kid you not. Okay. It was still going, but it was financially devastating to them. All right. Then once we're talking about that, windows, everyone wants to replace their windows, but windows up at the way tippy top. And that's because the typical payback from an energy efficiency perspective for windows is somewhere between, in years, somewhere between 75 and 230, depending on what building scientist you're drinking with. And so that's because most of our thermal energy loss is actually not through the glazing, but it's through the caulking and the air sealing around it, which you'll note is way down at the bottom. All right. And then finally, the very tippy top, that's your wind and solar and stuff like that. So you'll also know that the paybacks work better starting at the bottom and working your way up. Okay. So the pyramid of energy efficiency is a great way to move through plans and actions within your congregation. Now, well, where do I start? Well, on our website, Faith in the Common Good, and I should say, I work for Faith in the Common Good. Some of you know Faith in the Common Good. We were started by the former moderator, Bill Phipps, bless his heart, over 20 years ago. So we have a long history of working with the United Church, but we are multi-faith and work with everyone all the way across the country. On our website, and I'll put links in the chat later, we have a DIY faith building energy audit guide. It's a really good book. It's free. You can download it. Tells you what a heat pump is. If you want to talk about heat pumps, it'll tell you all that sort of stuff. Setback thermostats, programmable thermostat, LED lights. So for those of you in your congregation who know stuff about your building, and you're trying to have conversations with people who don't know what a heat pump is or why LED lights are important, that book has some great language that you can take to the board table. And I find that very, very empowering. It also has a worksheet at the back. You can go through that. And that's absolutely free. You can just download it, PDF. We may ask for your email, but we're not spamming you or nothing. We're just tracking. The only caveat to that DIY book, I will say out loud, is the lighting audit part is dated. Skip what it says and just count bulbs and say LED, yes or no. But other than that, and we're hoping to change that this year. Other than that, it's a great book. On the right, the Energy Star Action Workbook for Congregations. We are the only Canadian organization partnered with the US EPA. And so they have this workbook, and this is actually United Church right here in Nova Scotia, Dundas United Church. And they got Mennonites putting in new windows. So they did do new windows. They needed it. They deserved it. But they also put heat pumps in at the same time. So another really great tool, and that's both of those are free on our website, and I'll put the link in the chat later. A couple other resources. There is also even treasure maps. So you want to make it fun because everyone loves building stuff. There's even sort of, they call it a treasure map. So one way to just go around and make a really super quick walkthrough. Try to assess your building. Some of you have had energy audits on your own home. And with that, you got a book called Keeping the Heat In by Natural Resources Canada. It's actually a really great resource. It's written in human, it's not written in nerd. I really like the book. You can actually print it off, put it in the bathroom. It's entertaining reading, I promise, but it can really help you understand energy and energy savings in a really easy way. Speaking of building audits, how do we, what sort of spectrum is there? Well, there's the do-it-yourself, like those books. And so they're a great place to start because they're free, right? And so I always recommend the free things because I am English, Irish, French, and Scotch. So I've got all the cheap covered. So we want to be saving money first and foremost. Secondly, we offer a virtual green audit. So that's us, Faith in the Common Good. And a virtual green audit is when it doesn't make sense to come to your congregation, because we are a national organization, we can actually do it via Zoom. And that's me here and you there in your church on your iPad or whatnot, walking about, and me looking at things and you showing me stuff and me asking to see stuff. And we capture that, we record it, you get the Zoom recording and you get a one-page summary of recommendations in bullet points. And that's going to cost $100 an hour. And typical virtual green audits, depending on square footage, probably going to be a couple hours. So it's pretty low cost way to sort of gain access to an expert in your building. Not going to see everything. So we offer a green audit. That's myself or my colleague, David Patterson. Some of you know David Patterson. And we created this green audit looking specifically at faith community buildings. So we do look at energy because it's obviously what we're talking about today, but we look at air quality and food and water and waste and maintenance and marketing and rental agreement and heritage and bums in seats and everything else we can think of to make you sustainable across the board. You get a report that's 30 to 40 pages, take 3/4 of a day to do. Lots of photos in the report, and you're looking at under $2,000. It's a function of square footage, and we would sort that out. After that, you can have what's called an energy audit. We don't offer that, and which is great. We're just one piece of the pie. Energy audits are where you have an energy consultant like Stephen Dixon, who's going to talk after me, come in and carry out a building assessment through a very specific process and give you a report that looks at energy efficiency and payback, can help you with that, modeling your building, and really help with the nickels and dimes on how to move forward. And a lot of us may have gone through some sort of energy audit when we had our own homes assessed for any sort of rebates as well. And finally, there's a full-blown engineering audit. And typically that's where you're going to have like a major capital campaign. If you're doing renovations or major additions to the building and you've sort of got an architecture team, the engineering team would go through your building and make recommendations at a very detailed level. And so this is a spectrum. There's no right answer which one you should do. It all depends where you're at. But knowing that there is a difference in what you might need, that's really important to understand, because you shouldn't be jumping to the bottom when you don't need to, right? And you shouldn't be at the top if you're significantly farther down that path. Okay. Now, funding. As Harry said, I am also wearing two hats. I am running the Faithful Footprints grant program for the United Church, which means I'm actually the gatekeeper for handing out money. How much? Well, up to $20,000 for energy efficiency actions, such as lights and fans and insulation and appliances and whatnot. And if you are decarbonizing, physically removing a fuel burning appliance from the building and replacing it with electric, such as a heat pump, going to a heat pump, for example, there's a bonus 10 grand for a maximum now of 30,000. This is a 1/3, 2/3 split. So for every $1 your congregation brings to the table, United Church of Canada will bring $2 and put it down up to those maximums, which means if you're doing lights and a fridge and a heat pump, for example, and the whole project's maybe 45,000, you can access the $30,000 bonus maximum, and you pay 15 on a $45,000 project. That's a pretty good split. Gets even better if there are grants available to you through Ontario Hydro, for example, and you qualified for those, that counts as your contribution. So if you get $2,500 from Ontario Hydro to install LED lights, for example, That counts as your money, and UCC will put 5,000 on the table, and you have not spent a nickel. Perfectly allowed, because we're leveraging more. Awesome. So when we're looking at funding, regardless of where you are in Canada, we want to be checking with our energy providers, what grants or rebates are available. Okay. Although I live in Ontario, I sort of work at a national level, so I'm not fluent what is and isn't available. So you're going to check with your gas provider, which is the same Enbridge/Union. You're going to check with Ontario Hydro or whatever your local distribution company is, and see what grants or rebates available to you. Some municipalities have given out rebates, in my experience, and I'm working with almost 400 congregations coast to coast right now for the United Church on this program. Not many municipalities, most have been rural, and they've often been where congregations are offering certain services to the community, such as food banks or stuff like that. So that's something to keep in mind. Not a huge one, but it's a possibility. Federally, I don't know of anything right now that I'm familiar with that I've had any congregations come through, but giving a phone call to the MPP or your MP, shaking the bushes, threaten them with fire and brimstone. I think it's an excellent idea to remind them that we are here and we leverage our actions through our social connections, right? And that's really important. And that is me. Lots of details, and I'll put stuff in the chat. You can reach out to me. And I'm going to escape and then stop sharing. And I'll put some information in the chat, and people putting stuff in the chat. There'll be questions and I'll be happy to answer it. First, I'm going to introduce a colleague and also delightful to be able to call him a friend. Stephen Dixon from No Energy is also part of Emmanuel United in Waterloo. And Steve and I worked together through the Faithful Footprints Grant Program together. He worked on that, but Stephen is here because he's actually a super duper smart guy about energy, hence the building the name No Energy. He's been at this since 1989. He has over 800 energy assessments and facilitated over 1,700 energy management workshops, coast to coast to coast. If you have worked with any energy providers, Stephen's worked with them, and he knows energy data systems and software better than anyone. I'm delighted to introduce him to take things from here. So thank you, everybody. And I hand it over to Stephen.
Great, thank you, Stephen. I'm going to share my screen here. Everybody can see that. Stephen, can you just confirm that? Yeah, I guess I can confirm it with the new Zoom. Good.
Good.
All right, thanks everybody. And yeah, it's interesting. When I was asked to come here tonight, I said, well, I was kind of, torn between coming here as an energy person. And actually, it's been 42 years since I've been in the energy business. We've been incorporated since '89, but I've done energy efficiency since 1981. And it is funny because 1981, somebody said to me, what are you going to do for your career? And I said, I won't do the same thing for 40 years. Well, I actually did. So 42 years later, I'm still doing this. But so that's sort of one side of me, is to be all things energy. And that's, I've done lots of audits, but today, my son, who's actually online, Adam Dixon, he's out there. He and I, our mission in our business, and that sustains us, is to change the way organizations and people use energy. One person, one thought, one action at a time. So that's our mission. You can go to our website, see all that stuff. But that's the business side of it. On the personal side of it, I'm chair of a property committee at Emmanuel United Church in Waterloo. And I, like many of you out there, have some significant challenges when it comes to the building we have. We have a 3-part story building, 1905, 1938, 1963 wing. And actually the biggest challenge is probably the 63 wing, to tell you the truth, when given how things were constructed back then. So all the things that you're facing, I'm facing the same things. What I want to do tonight is just to share with you a few ideas that I've drawn from my work, but I also then use in my practice at the church too, and just sort of give you some things to think about. And I'm going to start with this one slide here, because this kind of summarizes, the journey that I made over 42 years. I started out, with a degree in science, and I started to work for a company. I actually got the job on a bet, but anyway, I ended up in this job, and they told me to go out and do energy audits. And I really didn't even know what an energy audit was back then. I had a degree in physics, but I figured it out pretty quick. And I spent many years walking around buildings looking for ways for people to save energy. And back in the day, it was all about, okay, what can I do to change the device? Can I change a motor? Can I change a water? Can I change a window? Those are the technological things we do to save energy. But I started to realize over the years that it was more than just that. It was more about the operational side of it, about the human side of it. It's funny because back in 1997, I ran into a social anthropologist in the province of Prince Edward Island, where I started and where I was working. And she said to me, Steve, you energy guys, technical guys, geeks are never going to crack this energy nut until you deal with people. Who better than a social anthropologist to call you on that one? And I just, at that point, I go, okay, what are you talking about? But then I started to think about it. And today, that's all I want to do, right? Is just to shift the way people think about this energy thing. And ultimately, you do something for 42 years, you're either in the weeds or you're in the middle of the road. Right now, we're right in the middle of the road because everybody wants to reduce carbon. And one of the best ways and quantifiable ways to do that is through the energy, your buildings and your vehicles and, you use in your life. So to me, the people side of this thing is huge, right? And we have to deal with the human side of it. We have to have awareness. We have to, speak to our habits. We have to look at procedures and we have to have feedback. I mean, nobody, you try to drive down the road and not get a speeding ticket, right? Without a speedometer in your car, it's tough, right? You got to know when you're doing the right thing. You got to know when you're doing the wrong thing. So we have to have that feedback. But today with a lot of measurement energy, it's important and it can be done. Steve, you talked about just looking at your bills and that's a great place to start. And there's some very simple ways to track those in a way that can be very informative. Ultimately, then it has to be an organizational function, meaning groups of people working together to building that energy managing culture. And that is mine and Adam's mission, in what we do is to build that. But I truly believe this is the way it's going to happen in any organization, including all of our faith communities. So to me, this is the foundation for everything. Technically, I love this slide. Somebody once saw in the presentation, they posted on LinkedIn, best slide in the whole presentation. So I said, okay, I'm going to include that in every presentation I do. So what I did here is I just take, the electricity and the gas bills, and I brought all the units to equivalent energy units in this fictitious building, which could be a church very easily. The same amount of energy is used in natural gas and electricity. But here in the province of Ontario, if you look at the cost of it, 90% of your cost is electricity and, maybe 10 or 15% of the cost is natural gas. You flip that over to the carbon side and the pie chart flips. Right. And therein lies our challenge. Right. I think in your advertising or in the link that I clicked on to register for the session talked about how to do this without going bankrupt. So how do we do this? How do we do this in a fiscally responsible but a sustainable fashion? Right. So, and I've often been caught saying nobody cares about energy. Well, they do, but they really care about carbon and they care about cost. So, and that's the perspective we have to take in this thing. So we have to reduce the cheapest energy right now, not forever. It's getting more expensive, but we have to reduce the cheapest one to get the greatest carbon emissions. So what I say is, this says, don't just go after gas, go after both, because you can take those savings you can get from electricity and use it to pay for the things you have to do on the gas side that maybe don't have quite the same return. So, it's great you can do this from 1 year's worth of energy bills in your church. You can create this, and it does set some perspectives. I've used this in a United Church camp where they were struggling with the challenge of getting to low carbon. When I did this, it kind of all became very clear to them what they had to do. So it's a very informative slide. The other thing about all this is no compromise. We need energy in all our buildings for a purpose, right? We never want to compromise that. Years ago, when I used to approach a building to do an energy audit, people would run in the other direction. Because I was going to cause them to freeze in the dark and suffocate, be scared and unproductive and make unreliable equipment. Never what it's about. In fact, what I discovered over the years, if I do this energy thing properly, I can actually make for better conditions. Great example. We had a dishwasher. We have an outreach program in Emmanuel United. It's called the Wayside and Bridgeport Cafe. We provide about 25 to 30,000 meals a year to the marginalized community. And we have a dishwasher. And that dishwasher sometimes didn't make final rinse temperature. Even we used the chemicals and so on. Public health called us on it. So after about the third time, I said, we're going to do something about this. And I realized we had, before my time, they installed an on-demand gas hot water heater, which was cranked up to about 165 degrees to get the 140 of the dishwasher. I said to myself, we can do better. So we put the new dishwasher in, we actually put a small downsized booster heater because I had constraints on the amount of electricity I could use. I was able to make final rinse temperature reliably every single time, improve conditions. I was able to eliminate the heat loss in the piping going from the hot water heater, and I dropped the hot water heater temperature down to 135. It's going to last a lot longer and use a lot less gas. So there's a great way to combine, reducing carbon at the same time as meeting the conditions and actually becoming more efficient overall. So never compromise. In fact, reliability of equipment will go up if we do this thing properly. We'll definitely get the savings, and the environmental impact will always come when you reduce that electricity and natural gas in a harmonious fashion. Now, I'm not going to go through all the details here, but Steve used that triangle, my version of that triangle, and I actually, that's right, Steve, you actually paid for that, or you helped me pay for that dishwasher or that booster heater on the dishwasher as well. So that was a great story. Faithful Footprints helped me out there in addition to the windows. So my take on all this goes back to 1996, and I was developing a workshop and doing energy assessments, do-it-yourself energy assessments, and I developed this thing called the 7 steps, and you can see the 7 steps on the screen. It starts out with understanding your present usage, ends up looking for opportunities. Somebody said to me about 2 years ago, Steve, that's the path to net zero or to low carbon, and it is, right? So on the left side, we need to understand what we're consuming. Stevie said monitoring is important, looking at the bills. Compare yourself. How do you compare to other churches? Are you doing well? Are you doing poorly? Or are you somewhere in between? And an energy audit can give you this information too. Understanding when you use that energy, both gas and electricity. And today, on my church, I can look hourly and see when we're using it. So if we're wasting it at night, I can see that. I can see that on the profile that I can get from the time of use meter from utility. All this stuff is freely available. Understanding where. That comes down to taking a walk around the building and building an inventory. That's something you might need an audit to do. Some of you would probably be inclined to do it. Some of you might need some help. But through those first 4 steps, you're going to have a much better understanding of the way your building uses energy. And I can almost guarantee you, if you ask yourself these 4 questions or drive yourself towards these 4 points, you will find opportunities. Now you've got to look for more opportunities and prioritize them. My mantra is waste, efficiency, and supply. And that's completely in line with, Steve, what you said earlier. Energy we don't need to use, that's waste. Efficiency, how well we take the purchased energy, converting it to the end use form where we get the benefit from it. And the supply side, okay, once we've reduced our consumption through waste elimination and efficiency improvement, then we're going to go looking for those renewables and those heat pumps and different things. So it's, as you said, Steve, financially, it's a very, I think, astute way to look at it, because your fast payback items are on the bottom, but you can bundle them together to get a project that has a very attractive financial situation. So I always start with what the facility needs, never compromise it. Then I move on to getting rid of waste. And this comes down to turning things off, turning things down, and better controlling things. And every one of us has opportunities to do that. You talked about the air leakage, Steve, absolutely in this category. Then we move to improving efficiency. We can do this operationally by simply operating and maintaining things in a better state, keeping that boiler tuned up every year, making sure that everything is operating properly, keeping those filters clean. But eventually we could be looking at replacing equipment and upgrading the envelope to do this. I know that I can get rid of waste by manual means, turning off the lights, or maybe doing a motion sensor to turn it off. I can improve efficiency by making sure my filters stay clean, or I can go to a more efficient piece of equipment to convert the fuel, or maybe go to a heat pump. So ultimately, we have options. And then the 7th step says, okay, after you've got your consumption down, your load down, right, then make sure that you're taking best advantage of things like heat recovery and heat pumps and renewable energy. And I always like to say, I look at my neighbor across the field here, and they've got photovoltaic panels on the roof. I would just hope when I walk in their house, if I ever do, I haven't done it yet, but that they would not be wasting energy or using it inefficiently, because those are solar panels are an expensive way to generate what we could otherwise avoid using to begin with. So that's the sort of what I call the sensible approach: waste, efficiency, and supply. This is a little shelter outside a senior's home that kind of puts all these 3 things together. They need a light in this shelter, so they have an energy efficient light bulb, an LED lamp. They've got a light and motion sensor controlling when the lights are on, and they have a photovoltaic panel on the roof providing electricity. You think, well, that's an expensive way to get light to a smoking shelter. But I was working with an electrician once. He said, Steve, that's actually cheaper than running the wire, the disconnect, everything else. So overall, that's the best option, and it's the most renewable, and it's the most sustainable option for getting light to that little shelter. Hopefully you can keep that one in mind: waste, efficiency, and supply. When it comes to looking at doing things in any building, we have to think about the lifespan of the equipment that we have, right? So those lights, CFLs, LEDs, those things, need to be replaced more frequently. But when we do something to building envelope for another reason, for example, or we replace a boiler, that boiler is going to be there for 20 years. If we want to get to 80% in 10 years, we can't put in what we've got there now. We've got to think about other options. So that's all I'm asking you to think about here is, staging this stuff, not doing it all at once, staging it. When it comes to actually prioritizing things, I'll make sure this presentation gets sent out through Esther, but this kind of gives you some criteria to look at when starting to prioritize. We're doing this right now in our own church, right? We're going to go through and we're going to prioritize those actions that we know can take that will reduce waste, improve efficiency, and then look at the most optimal supply. And the difference between 80 and 90% carbon reduction and 100% is huge, okay? The difference in what you have to do. So, but if you do this in a sequence fashion, you will then be ready to take that next step without going bankrupt, as you said in your advertising, if I can come back to that, Esther. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say today. But thank you for the time to say that. And I'll hang around and be available to help anybody that needs it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephen. And those are like that kind of simple thinking. And I feel that I want the rest of you to know, because I'm really looking forward to this conversation that's going to happen now between the people here in this group. In your community, I'm sure there's someone who can see these efficient ways forward and those quick routes. And also maybe we can throw questions back to other experts who are here too when we can't figure it out on our own. But look in your community, you probably have somebody you can say, that's a dumb way to do it. This is a smart way to do it, and get them. And now it's really time to answer your questions and let you, the crowd, have the floor. So I'm going to stop talking, and both Jeffrey and Don Ford will be monitoring whose turn it is next. But it's time to throw out your questions.
It's interesting, after you talk about experts, I always learned the definition of the word expert was the person that knows the limit of their knowledge of when to ask the other person, which is exactly what you're saying.
I'm just looking to see, Esther, if anyone has raised their hand or put anything in the chat. And so far, people haven't done either. So people just remember, if you have a question or a comment, there we go. Oh, sorry, I forget your name, but I know that it's your employee number that you have up on your Zoom.
Yeah, it's Scott Bradley from Nob Hill United Church in Toronto. So my twin and I became the property committee a couple of years ago when the three older congregants passed away. So we were given a church without a book, and it's been an incredible learning curve. At Nob Hill United Church, we have a daycare. We rent out our church to Seventh-day Adventists. And what was mentioned earlier about, changing basically the paradigm of getting people to understand, hey, turn it off, lower, reduce. We put in programmable thermostats. And I always remember my dad saying, if we can just get another year out of the boiler. And man, did I never think that I would be like my dad saying stuff like that. So it's been a tremendous learning curve, and I think we're on a better path. But like one of the questions I have is, in a boiler system, like you talked about 80 and 90% efficiency. I think our boiler's 40 years old. Where do you lose the efficiency over the lifetime of a boiler? And is it, we're not on a shoestring budget, and obviously we'll look into those grants, etc. I know we just had to replace a fan, but at a simple level, where do you lose the efficiencies over time that maybe a simple change, a less costly change, could help that boiler out going forward?
It's a good question, Scott. I'll take a stab at it, and then if Stephen has any thoughts. Combustion cans corrode. Combustion cans get dirty air in it, and so soot can build up inside. That's why maintenance is really, really, really important.
Okay.
And so just that operational piece of just combustion and corrosion, carbon, all of that in there wears down the system.
Okay.
And so it's just, that's part of it. And yeah, parts get tired. Things are just not operating as it used to be. So yeah, that's sort of the short answer.
Yeah, no, actually that's a great answer. That's what I was looking for. And I mean, I think our biggest concern is, you know, obviously replacing a boiler for any church is expensive, and we've got 2 boilers. But it's that delta, like where do we need to go to, and you know, to try to get to net zero. And but this has been a great topic so far this evening. It's really, really appreciated. And I'm going to thank Hetty Baker Graff. She's on the call here tonight, who invited me to this.
Cool. And so what I recommend, Scott, typically and for everybody, is have your heating contractor, have her come out to the building and have her answer 2 questions. What is best guess efficiency, current operational efficiency of your heating system, furnace or boiler? What is best guess current operational efficiency? And what is best guess current life expectancy? Right? When you have those 2 questions under your belt, then you can make a plan, because what is it? Some Gail Lawler's number, Stephen, it's something like 86% of all heating systems are replaced after the old one died.
Yeah.
Right. It is always reactive, never proactive. And you know you're not going to get the best deal, best bang for your buck. And everyone on this call, we're working with the church's money, right? We care, we love, it's not ours. Right. And we're always like, 1 more year, right, Scott? Like 1 more year. That's what we're really hoping for, right? Because we're so caring about the church's money and the well-being, right? But sometimes that can hamstring us. So having some professional answer that question can help us, empower us.
So Stephen, if there's anybody else that wants to jump in here, I got a couple of thoughts. I'm just going to say, does anybody else have any thoughts there?
Maybe I'll speak up. I'm the geologist, not the physicist or the building guy, but something that can happen with boilers especially is as you raise water temperatures, the calcium carbonate comes out of solution. And I know there are chemicals that you can add, but nothing's 100%. So what you get in an old boiler is a lot of calcium carbonate building up, which really interferes with heat transfer.
Yeah, 1/8 of an inch of calcium carbonate or scale on the water side of a boiler can reduce efficiency by up to 10%.
Yeah, and it also tends to make the valves stick. So, you know, it can be not necessarily the root of all evil with boilers, but it's a common problem, and especially with a church, because very few of us, if any, can afford to pay a professional boiler person to maintain the boiler and make sure the chemicals are added in the right concentration at the right time. So anyway, that's a common thing, Scott, in terms of what happens with boilers in particular.
I love it, Don. I love your nerdness. Thank you so much for sharing, man. That is brilliant. Ruth Brahman, I saw you popping in there. Did you have something to say?
Yes, I just basically to reiterate what's been said already in terms of boiler and heating system efficiency or inefficiency. As the older it gets, the less efficient it becomes, and that's due mainly to the points that you've already mentioned, you know, like blocking up the lines. Boiler efficiency probably dropped to around about 40% because it hasn't been cleaned in several years, etc., etc. Yeah, you're going to need to replace the boilers pretty soon by the sounds of it. And your best bet is to get somebody who is honest and just go over the system that you've got, point out where the problems are, and at the same time come up with a plan as to how and when you're going to replace them, because anything that's more than about 20 years old now, it should still be there. It should be out and with something new put in its place. This is what we've done at Comer Avenue. We were lucky enough to come into a whole packet full of money from an adjacent big development, who's basically funded most of our renovation, which it ended up being close to $10 million. Yeah, that was about 20% over budget due to the pandemic. But yeah, we replaced everything. We replaced everything.
That's great, Ruth. And for those who didn't catch it in chat, Ruth also recently retired York University Facility Services. Ruth knows stuff. That just cool. That's all I'm saying. More cool building nerds here. I'm delighted. Thanks, Ruth.
You're welcome.
And
So Steve,
go ahead.
go.
No, shoot.
So Steve, when you talked about someone who could take a stab at what the efficiency of the boiler is, but there are, depending on the type of boiler, there are tests you can do. You can run a combustion test on a boiler, and that will give you a rough idea. Like there's another piece that we haven't talked about, and that's depending on the type of boiler, how well the air and the fuel is being mixed and the ratios. Just like your car, you have to have the right combination. Your car has a computer on it that's constantly looking at the mass airflow of the oxygen and so on and getting it right, but you don't have anything like that on a boiler. So an adjustment once in a while driven by a measurement of the flue gases. That's one thing. But the other thing too is that the heat transfer you talked about, you can also detect when that's degraded because your flue temperature will rise and over what it would normally be for that type of boiler. So like a simple combustion test can go a long way to actually telling you just how bad the situation is. Now that doesn't tell you the efficiency, that just tells you the combustion efficiency, and you have to make some adjustments beyond that. But it's a good diagnostic from that point of view. Another thing that I would mention too is that don't be afraid to think about something other than a boiler when you're replacing, because we had a steam boiler which heated our sanctuary. We now actually have 2 forced air gas furnaces heating the sanctuary. And who would think we could go from a steam boiler with a high temperature medium like that to a forced air gas furnace with a relatively low air temperature? But it does work. Obviously, you have to improve the thermal efficiency of your building, your envelope to some extent to make that work. But that's going to then pave the road to an air source heat pump to do the same job when I replace those furnaces, which will probably happen the next 5 years or so. And that's going to take a big chunk out of our carbon right there. And we also changed our, we had a 4-pack of Wheel McLean, just gas. They were really inefficient gas boilers. We replaced those with a condensing gas boiler about 7 years ago. So that made a big difference. But the other thing about the water system, as you talked about, Don, is the calcium carbonate, is that most hydronic systems are closed systems. And you don't actually add chemical to them maybe at time of flushing. And what happens is that there's always a bit of leakage from that system, and you're always making up water from the city. And here we're in Waterloo County, which is the water hardness is like 25 part per million, 17 grade. It's terrible. And even a little bit of makeup is adding calcium carbonate that precipitates out. So it's worth, if you can take a boiler down and have a look at the, if you know the stack temperature is higher from the test, you can have a look at the accumulation of calcium carbonate or scale on the water side of the boiler. If it's that type of boiler, that's also a good remedial action. But at the end, I think, Ruth, you're right. The replacement thing is definitely the thing to think about. But when you replace, think about how you're going to get to no carbon eventually. And that's, to me, it's like going to the air source heat pump is what I'm after there. So
yeah, that's great. That's great. I'll give a shout out to a company in Quebec we've worked with, some Faithful Footprints congregations, and they'll take your old rads, working rads, refurbish them, and he's actually put in an electric heating element and fill them with oil, and turn them into, so in the one church they took out one of the loops and did all that, and then downsized their boiler to an electric boiler from a gas boiler. So it really made a huge difference for them. So there are different ways to go about it. In the chat, Deborah Hart, replacing a very old steam boiler and replacing with a new steam boiler. Yes, the Faithful Footprints grant program would qualify. I need your expression of interest filled out, and this is the point that I'm telling everyone, and then Deborah, we're going to have a one-on-one.
Okay, great.
The clock starts when I have a conversation with you. So I need the expression of interest filled out. If anyone's looking at major purchases very soon, fill out the expression of interest to the Faithful Footprints grant program. And then we have a conversation. Anything purchased after the conversation counts. Anything purchased before the conversation does not count. Okay, and I don't want to leave anyone in the lurch. Really, really important. Deborah, tell me about your boiler.
Well, if we're, I'm in a shared ministry with the Presbyterian and United Churches, and the building belongs to the Presbyterians, but we pay, our percentage of the capital costs. It had two old steam boilers, and one died ages ago, and the other one's been limping along. And so I know they're in the purchase, like it's getting, parts of it are installed. We haven't paid for all of it yet.
Okay. Well, give me an expression of interest. You and I have a conversation. I might have to double check with head office about the Presbyterian United, but
Yeah.
I suspect we may be able to help you in some way.
It's in our agreement that whatever percentage of the cost, we get some back if we were to leave, that sort of thing. So
Cool.
I know it's legally.
Good. Yeah, no, and it, I'm not the money guy, I'm the building nerd, right? So,
Yeah, okay.
So faithfulfootprints.org, go to grants. At the bottom, there's a big green button, expression of interest, hit that button. And it comes right to me, and then we'll have a conversation this week. We can.
Great, thank you.
Andrew Hellebust, case studies about old stone wall buildings, Trinity St. Paul's. That's a big old, you're not just talking any little stone church there, you're talking about the biggie. Yeah, the best way to deal with that is to knock it all down and then put new up. That's what we should. We're not doing that, right? Obviously, Trinity St. Paul is a magnificent building, and I'm a longtime friend and colleague of Kendra Fry's. Thermal massive buildings are actually performed differently than thermally insulative buildings, and thermally massive buildings can typically really benefit from boilers, from radiant energy, because it charges that thermal battery better than forced air does. Like Stephen had said, we still want to kind of move towards heat pumps. There is such things as electric boilers, as heat pump boilers. They exist. I haven't seen one in a while, but they do exist. But actually, thermally massive buildings perform really well in our climate as long as we keep them at a moderate temperature. It's when they get really cold and then the stone gets cold and it sucks the life out of you on Sunday sitting in the pews. Right. So we kind of always want to keep that building at a steady temperature. And that's actually typically a better performing for thermally massive. But Andrew, where are you? I don't see. Wave your hand, speak up, tell me what you got. Tell me what's going on, Andrew. Where you got? There you are. Thank you.
Hi. Well, I agree. We can't keep on using gas or fossil fuel boilers. So we do have there are hydronic heat pumps, yes. But I think you also have to address the thermal losses through the envelope of the building. And it is challenging when it's a historic facade that you're not supposed to change.
Yep.
So
air sealing, and air sealing are really important for thermally massive buildings, more than the insulation. Right.
And it's probably important from a point of view of preventing the exfiltration of warm moist air through that structure too. Years and years ago, probably 41 years ago, I went to a presentation by a gentleman named Martin Weaver. He worked for Heritage Canada. He was an architect, and he had a 40-slide presentation in an evening like this, and it was 40 disasters that occurred when people tried to thermally upgrade the envelope of basically older structures like churches that were in thermal equilibrium with their environment, right? So many buildings are in thermal equilibrium, and as soon as you stick something in there, like insulation, and I saw this firsthand in Prince Edward Island, the sandstone foundation of a church insulated from the inside, literally tore the church down, as you said, Steve, but it took the foundation down in about 2.5 years, just because the sandstone absorbed the moisture, it froze and it crumbled. So you have to be so careful. So I guess I would lean towards what you said, Steve, is, keeping this status quo may actually be the most prudent thing to do in that situation.
Mhm. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question, Andrew. I'm just checking for hands here. Doug, regarding efficiency of existing boiler, we alternate 1 or 2 motors when are not needed, and we install the setback system. Yeah, that's a great approach. I've seen that in a lot of churches where they've got 2 boilers and they're just rotating. My thinking, and again, I'm open to others who have had large buildings with multiple boilers. My thinking is to run at 70-30, not 50-50. And the only reason I say that is at 50-50, they're both going to time out at the same time. And so you're going to replace both of them. So if you're going to use one boiler, my approach, just because I'm cheap and wanting to spread that big burden over, I'd run 70-30. But anyone else?
Is that 2 boilers that you've got there when you say 2 motors?
No, and it's 2 motors, not 2 boilers.
So 2 circulator pumps then?
Yes.
Yeah. So typically when you have 2 pumps in a system, it's designed or intended in most cases to run lead lag. So you just equalize the wear and tear and you just move back and forth between the pumps. One would be a backup and then you switch over. But I don't know your exact situation, but yeah.
Right. And the other part that I was mentioning is we've orchestrated a setback thermostat so that from 10 at night to 4 in the morning, the temperature required from the boiler is reduced. And then there's a time period for it to build back up and warm up the building.
Great, Doug. What church are you with, Doug?
St. Paul's in St. Paul's United Church in Amelia.
Okay.
Wasn't that the church that was on the slide, Doug?
Yes, it was.
Oh, Doug Daly. Oh, hey,
yes.
Buddy. All right. Sorry. Yeah, it was good to recognize it, Stephen. Yes, Doug might have actually been in that, but Doug would have been in that photo too. It's probably back of his head.
I had to look, but yes, I was there.
Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Good to have you here, my friend. Barb Imrie, where's Barb? Barb there, okay. Building a single pane stained glass windows. Yep, that let the ladybugs in. They do. Caulking are really, really important for the stained glass. So working on the outside of that. 2 reasons for that. We're talking about the air leakage, obviously the energy efficiency, but many stained glass, depending on the smaller buildings, Palgrave will be smaller, is you're most likely going to have wood details, okay, up against holding them in. And what happens is when the caulking fails, the water gets behind that wood quarter round. The water gets into the back that's unpainted. It expands the wood swells, the paint blisters, and now significantly more water gets in. That leads to deterioration. That's where we're going to have the stained glass and the rose window drop on the kids and kill them. We've replaced windows because of that, structural concerns. But definitely everyone needs to take a good look at their outside windows once the snow's gone and just look at the state of the caulking, because they're so high. We don't look at them in great detail, and that's just normal for all of us. But we have really difficult windows to reach. Caulking them keeps their structural integrity, but also maintains resilience and energy efficiency on the building.
So when your comment was about the efficiency of the windows being, I'm going to say, almost the last things to replace, Humber College suggested that we put in a second, I'm going to say, a clear glass panel cut to fit on the inside, so we'd still have the
Yep.
stain on the outside, but the warmer bubble on the inside. So
there's a challenge, and a lot of people may even have Lexan as or polycarbonates as a solution on the outside for vandals or whatever.
yeah,
Couple challenges with that. If it's open glazing, so there's no coating on it. When we're looking at outside, inside, when we're looking at the clear opaque glass or Lexan, because it's UV open, with the stained glass caulked in place, What can happen is because the ultraviolet gets through, we now have this little air chamber, and it can get very, very, very warm in this little air chamber, little oven.
Okay,
And the
moldy.
convective loops will go up. And what we have seen is with some stained glass, depending on the type of glass, and then depending on the lead as well, that on south and west sides, we can, not on all stained glass, but on really specific ones, we can actually hit melt temperatures, and that can sometimes lead to slumping. And so we really want to be cautious about putting glazing in front or behind. There are stained glass professionals around, Rainbow Makers, stained glass in Barrie, lovely folk. He'll put a double glazed with UV protection out front, and then put all your mullions on the double glazed. And so from the street, you actually can't see it. And it's a beautiful solution. We had one, there was someone here who may have had that done to their building. There are solutions, but you want to be really thinking about protecting your stained glass and making sure we're making the right decision. So short answer, that sometimes it's not simple.
All right, I know the ladybugs would love it, but yep, okay.
Well, caulking, and all your operables, the sash ones typically, are like the awning ones or the drop down ones. You can weather strip those gently with some peel and stick, and that will also reduce the infiltration of ladybugs for sure. But caulking, check on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Someone else got ladybugs. Yeah, we love the ladybugs. They're good.
It's the stink bugs or the elder bugs that are the culprit right now. So.
I'll agree on that. No one's going to argue with those.
Even if I can follow up on that for a minute, if you put a storm on the exterior of the stained glass, but leave the interior unencumbered, will not that heat that's built up between the external storm window and the stain window, will it not just radiate into the building?
It depends on a direction, and it depends on whether or not there's a coating on that piece of exterior glazing. So does it have a low E coating, right? All of our windows are double glazed low E coating windows, right? That low E coating stops the ultraviolet. And so with stained glass, that can be, and sometimes it works perfectly fine, and Bob's your uncle, and some of you have got Lexan or Plexi on your windows and have been there for 40 years and not a problem. There are a small percentage of leaded stained glass where it is a problem, and it's a small percentage.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On the topic of stained glass windows, I was just curious if you had any. We have a collection of storm windows all over our stained glass windows. And some of them were installed tremendously well and vented well and sealed up well, and a few of them over the years were not. And those ones are now slated for replacement. And we're debating the possibility of extending those thermal bridges past the sills to try to fight the thermal bridging around the windows. And that's been suggested to us by one of our engineers, and another one of our engineers thinks the first engineer is out to lunch. So I'm just kind of curious, since I'm in a room with building nerds, I kind of feel obliged to ask for if anyone has an opinion on the topic.
It's important. What church are you with, Frank?
Metropolitan United.
In where?
Toronto.
You guys are already in the program, aren't you?
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
You spent your money. Thank you.
Well, keep it up. Honestly, because that's a big, I'd bring in a stained glass expert.
Yeah, we have all three of them at the table right now, 2 engineers and our stained glass expert, and I've been charged with the task of getting them to agree on something.
And so one wants to put some sort of thermal spacer in and one doesn't? Is that what
Yeah, one wants to extend past the sills to address the thermal bridging. The other one thinks it's overkill, and that by having new glass and low E, we'll address the problems. And of course, the stained glass maker is concerned about the heritage of having the storm windows be larger than the windows themselves, and the aesthetic of that, although we've spoken to Heritage and they aren't too concerned about it as long as the shape is maintained.
Yeah, as long as the shape's maintained. But the stained glass consultant has no concerns from either solution impacting the stained glass, basically, as long as it's not touching the stained glass, I'm assuming. Is that correct?
Yeah, as long as it's properly vented and sealed properly, the stained glass folks are content with whatever we do. But I'm not sure if this whole question of the thermal bridging is worth the headache.
I
Because
don't,
it will be an aesthetic
bridging
change.
is that the thermal bridging at the sill?
Yes.
So just, that's really all they're concerned about is the sill itself, a piece of.
Yeah, the sill and the perimeter stone around the window. The one engineer wants to extend the storm pane about 8 inches all the way around the window.
Well, I think that would almost infringe upon your masonry, which is what the Heritage probably are concerned about, aren't they?
Yeah, we'd have to stay right on the stone.
Yeah.
I wouldn't, I think a thermal bridge, when we're talking about like, all that masonry on this side or this side of the masonry, I wouldn't be going 8 inches around, just from aesthetics perspective. So I'd probably be more conservative, as long as the stained glass consultant's cool with the more conservative one. Movement shouldn't be that dramatic. If it's that dramatic, you should have, serious other issues going on. That's my take on it. You could try to do some sort of floating piece, I guess, a bit more. As long as it's not rigidly fixed, you should be fine.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna jump in here.
Please.
Conversation, just in terms of time, I'm going to, let's extend the conversation if needed to like 8:20, but then we'll have to cut it off then. So this is kind of like a warning to people, and Harry, I'm letting you know, we'll go to 8:20. Otherwise, just letting you know that's what's gonna happen and what's ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so to speed that up. That's my email. Stephen Dixon can put his email in there as well. Obviously, folks can reach out to me, certainly for the Faithful Footprints grant program as well. But if you have some questions, 5-minute question, you just need an answer, I'm happy to answer that question, no problem. Stephen will charge it because he's a good guy.
No, I don't know. I don't.
I'm just bugging. Stephen taught me how to use some energy software a very long time ago, and with 4 churches, and that's how Stephen and I know each other. So he has a long history of putting his incredible knowledge into practice with faith communities. So yeah, peel and stick no. Scott's got peel and stick no draft caulking. Yep, the old removable caulking we used to put on the storms. That stuff works great. Love it to bits. I recommend that for a lot of congregations. And especially for your attic hatch, so you can caulk up your attic hatch. And with the removable caulking, what I recommend is you put a string or around your storms you may remove, you actually put a string in the crack and have the 2 little ends dangle out, and then caulk it. And then when you want into the attic hatch or whatever, you got 2 little pull strips, makes your life super easy.
Good idea.
It's a way to go about that for sure.
So Stephen, are you still there?
Yep.
I did want to ask about caulking on the inside of the stained glass windows. Would you bother to do that if you did the exterior?
It needs to be a super flexible caulking, because stained glass moves. It's supposed to float in place. Okay, so there is movement with that glass, which is why I would always deal with the mullions and whatnot on the outside first and foremost.
Thank you.
As far as where you do the caulking, and also the way that the window is facing, be careful between the north facing windows and the south facing windows, because heat buildup when you're going to double glazing, you can run into trouble if you haven't got proper exhaust, air exhaust from between the panes. If you've got south facing, we run into this trouble on campus at York, and it was an easy fix. And once we realized what was happening, we just made sure that what went on the outside was easily removable so that we could change things very quickly. But generally speaking, it ended up with us putting fixed panes in and just making sure there was enough room for ventilation, that the heat didn't build up between the stained glass and the outside pane. North side, there's no problem.
That's awesome. Excellent. Thanks for the advice, Ruth. Appreciate that.
I'll just add that at our church, we used the plexiglass or Lexamic, but we put Velcro on the frame and on the windows so that they're easy to come on and off. And the engineer in our church was talking about drilling 2 little holes in the bottom just to allow for some venting if needed. And he felt that putting it on the inside was the better solution. So they're on the inside, they're easy to take on and off, but nobody can even tell they're there, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I don't suspect the Velcro is going to make it airtight, but it will add some value for sure, but it's not airtight.
Yeah, it actually has made a difference already. Yeah, but you're right.
That's good.
It seems like this is dying down a bit. So I'm wondering about just continuing on, and I'm just letting Harry and Juan know that the numbers of the slides have changed slightly because I've added in 3 slides of information. So that, and I think that's my, so Harry, I think you're going to talk. I'm going to start presenting again and then let Harry get back to, let me see if I can get this go. Sorry, just trying to get down, exiting full screen and share my screen.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Esther, it's Doug Neely again. Sorry, just really wanted to thank again the 2 Stevens. They've helped me get much clearer on the direction that we need to take. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah. Harry,
Okay.
do you want to go ahead? Yeah.
Here is Esther to summarize the key points of from the discussion, and then Ron will introduce our next meeting.
So I just was taking notes just to let you know, and I'll have these up for just a second while I'm talking, but this slideshow will be shared. Stephen has said, both Stevens have said that their slideshows will be available as well, I think, and we will add them plus a recording of this meeting and the chat to the Ecological Justice website. So I can show you where that will be in a minute. If you see anything on these slides, so it's actually gone to 3 slides as I've been trying to take notes and listen at the same time. If you see anything there, please let me know, and my email is going to come up as well about things that you think were missed or are incorrectly added, and we'll try, but at least I tried to capture some of the key ideas that were being talked about. So if you want to see where these are available, if you go to, I just have to type in Shining Waters Regional Council, it pops up. There's a Justice tab, and then under Ecological Justice, this would be where we would be adding in that slideshow and other resources so that you can see them there at the bottom. And we'll put the date and just have all that information available for you. You can share that with other people as well. I assume nobody's noticed anything already because it's very fine font. It's more to look at later. But I also wanted to show you about this concept of a shared document. So I'm putting this link in the chat, which means that if you click on that link, it should open this document and you should find that you actually can type on it. Once you have opened the document, it then shows in your Google Drive. So to have a Google Drive, you need a Gmail account. Once you make a Gmail account and you use Google Chrome anyway, you'll see these 9 dots pop up, and then you can access your drive in them. So if I open a new tab, those 9 dots will be here and I can access my drive. And so as soon as you open the document once, it will show up in your drive. So when you just go to the beginning of your drive, you will see it there. And it would be in this list here as well. The cool thing about a shared document is that you can see, we got people here already, you can make posts, because when you type on it, when I type on it, we can see what we're doing. You can also comment on posts. So you can see I highlighted this section, comment on posts, and this little thing pops up. I can add in a comment saying, this is an excellent post or whatever. And that comment becomes linked to that part of the text as well. You can delete posts because you have editing ability, but please don't. We do have the ability to go into history and see who did the evil things. Teacher, see, I'm a retired teacher. I love this because I can go in and say, you just deleted your friend's work. I'm suggesting that we add posts at the top rather than at the bottom. So you just click in here, type your post, hit enter, and your post would stay at the top, so that way we can see the most recent ones as well. So that document, that is a place where after this, you can continue to put questions and answers, and we can continue to let this conversation go on. We are still exploring ways to make links, like whether we have WhatsApp groups or something where you can still communicate with each other, because we're really talking about trying to crowdsource solutions so we don't make inefficient solutions to problems in our church that someone else has already figured out is a problem. I mean, just the expertise here. Ruth, thank you so much for all of your insights. There's so many wonderful brains together helping us get rid of some of the mistakes we make. And I think this is really what we're hoping to do. And along that line, our ask is for you to begin to develop your own high resource network by holding a building retrofit networking meeting in your church, to which you invite political leaders, but also the engineers, scientists in your community who may be really desperately hoping for a place to share their information, contractors, residents. Get as many people together as possible. And I'm just helping us understand that we are really trying to change the narrative from focusing only on our faith building, but instead looking at how we can share this information with our community. Because I can now say, hey, I should caulk around my attic thing in my home. I don't need to just do that in my church. I now understand what to look for in my building and my own home, and about the importance of getting my furnace, checked, because I attended this meeting. And we can learn from each other for all the buildings in our community. So let's share this information. In the process, I hope you find your own experts in your community who you can go to whenever you need to get information from them. So that's our big ask, is that you hold a meeting similar to this. Stephen, I've already added in your email address here, and please know that you can contact us, and we will pass questions around to the experts we've collected as well, and help you make contact with the people you need to make contact. And it says this slideshow, Stephen's slideshow, also the recording, and I think both Stephen's slideshows will be in that place that I showed you in the Justice tab, Ecological Justice. Juan, I'm turning this over to you.
Sorry, I passed.
Okay. I was just, the thing we were going to say here was just about the upcoming meeting on Wednesday, June 21st. And Jen is going to be hosting, so she couldn't be here tonight, but she's also on the Ecological Justice Subcommittee. And she's going to be leading, and she asked that we share this information with you. While new technologies certainly cannot solve an environmental crisis alone, Green design is an exciting way of harnessing the scientific knowledge which already exists to tackle everyday problems with the aim of reducing consumption and waste. And green design spans the development of renewable energy sources, transportation systems, waste management, and circular economy product design. And its principles can also be used by individuals to consider their everyday actions. In addition, considering not only how the systems consume materials, this is reminding me a lot of Stephen Dixon of your presentation, consume materials and produce waste, but also who gets to access goods and services and to what end. A design for social justice approach can be incorporated in order to address social justice issues. So it'll be similar to the way this meeting was, with someone with some expertise on the topic, but also then lots of time for networking among the people who show up. So please share this in your faith communities to allow the sort of right people to come, encourage people you think might benefit from that discussion. And that will be held Wednesday, June 21st at 7 p.m. on Zoom as well. Thank you.
I've appreciated being here and would like to invite other youth to ask about hosting a future event. This is also something that is going on my resume for potential employment. Please ask Esther Collier at targetclimatechange@gmail.com if interested.
Thank you everyone for coming. We really appreciate you being here. I'm putting my email in the chat as well. Anyone have last thoughts you want to share?
I do, Esther. Doug Daly from St. Paul's in Aurelia. Once again, listening to these two gentlemen who can just clarify a whole bunch of issues in 2 or 3 slides, I'm very thankful because it helped me again focus on where I need to go. Others have felt that same way. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, very thankful.
You're welcome, Doug.
It's such a good discussion. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Thanks all.
Thanks, Esther and Harry and everyone else for presenting.
Good to see everybody. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Esther.